Hey, I'm picking up with the Nightbooks again. I hope you've been enjoying it and not too scared. Remember, if you do any kind of art or it inspires you to decide which story in here you think is the best, or even write your own scary story, please share it with me. I would love to see it. All right, we're going to start off with Chapter 10, Danglers. They walked between a series of long tables, their way lit by glowing plants. Alex passed a neon green flower with tooth-like petals that snapped at him as he passed, a miniature tree no bigger than a marble, and a perfect red rose that Yasmin warned him was the most dangerous thing in the entire nursery. Alex supposed that he should have been scared, but mostly he was just excited. He couldn't help it. Creepy plants were awesome. At last, Yasmin stopped walking. "This is it," she said. Alex followed her gaze to a tall trellis that had been erected on the opposite side of the tables. Vines twisted up, over and between the diamond-shaped spaces, their colors bright against the darkness. Some were spiky, others had thorns. One yellow vine hung lower than the rest, as though weighed down. Along its bottom dangled dozens of tiny sacks about the size of golf balls. Alex caught a whiff of something foul. "That the vine?" he asked, holding his nose. "Yeah," Yasmin said. "It's gotten worse. We have to hurry." "You have something we can cut it down with?" Yasmin scoffed. "If it was that easy, I would have done it myself." She said, "Look, you see this?" She leaned over the table and pointed to one of the sacks hanging from the underside of the vine. "It's a dangler. They grow on sick plants, the magic kind at least, like an infection. This poor vine's got them everywhere now." Alex leaned over the edge of the table for a closer look. The thin skin of the sack was pulled taut over a black shape, like a chrysalis. "What's inside?" he asked. "Could be anything," Yasmin said. "I've only seen 2 danglers actually open. The first one was just a regular old spider. The second one," she fiddled with her cap. "I don't like to talk about the second one. Luckily we got it right away." "We?" Alex asked, surprised. "Natasha actually helped?" Yasmin gave him a curt nod and continued. She seemed eager to change the topic as quickly as possible. "Right now, the thing inside this dangler is just chilling," she said, "sucking up plant juice. We cut down the vine, though, and it's like taking a bottle away from a baby. It'll wake up. They'll all wake up." Alex jumped in surprise as the sack in front of him suddenly twitched, causing a chain reaction that continued all the way down the vine, like a string of lights caught in the wind. "If we can't cut down the vine," he said, "then what do we do?" "Remove each and every dangler," Yasmin said, "one at a time. If we're careful enough, whatever's growing inside the dangler won't realize that it's been cut off from its food, at least for the first minute or two. That's more than enough time to kill it." Alex examined the sack in front of him. It dangled slightly from the vine on a purplish strand, like a fruit on its stem. If he managed to twist it just the right way, it looked like it would come off. Still, he couldn't imagine touching the fragile-looking skin without the entire thing bursting in his hand. "If the dangler breaks," he started. "Then the thing inside wakes up instantly," Yasmin said. "In your hands, not a good thing." "My hands?" Alex said. "Don't worry," Yasmin said. "I'll take care of the hard part. You just have to... Here, I'll show you." She handed him a pair of cacti that glowed like phosphorescent coral, and then took 2 of her own. Alex followed her the length of the 3 tables until they reached a tiny metal door on the floor. Yasmin placed the cacti around the door like work lights and then lifted it by a curved handle, revealing a hole filled with swirling darkness. "I'll hand you the dangler," Yasmin said. "You throw it in the void here." "The void?" "It's magic," Yasmin said. "There's a few of them in the nursery. The one closest to the door is where I take the trash out every day. Basically, it's the world's greatest garbage chute. You drop something down there, it's gone forever. So you know, don't stick your hand in." "I don't think you have to worry about that," Alex said, taking a cautious step back from the hole. They returned to the beginning of the vine. Lenore was waiting for them. The cat had found a good spot and settled in, confident that something was going to go terribly wrong and wanting to have the best view possible when it happened. "Stay put," Yasmin told Alex. "I'll twist the dangler off and hand it to you." "How do I make sure it doesn't break?" Alex asked, wishing he had found better gloves. "Be gentle," Yasmin said, "like when someone blows bubbles and you catch one on the tip of your finger. They always pop when I do that." "Okay," she said, not encouraging, "but that's cool. How about this? Hold your hands together like cupping water. Only the water might eat you if you drop it." Alex did as he asked. His hands only trembled a little. "Perfect," Yasmin said, though she didn't look very confident. "We'd better get started." Try to go as fast as possible, but not too fast. Make sure you don't trip, and maybe don't breathe too much. Also, the danglers sometimes move, so be ready for that. Anything else? Alex asked between gritted teeth. Nope, that about covers it. Yasmin climbed onto the rickety table. It wobbled beneath her weight. Shouldn't you be wearing gloves too? Alex asked. Need my fingers free, she said. This takes a delicate touch. Yasmin reached up and pinched the spot where the sack joined the vine between her thumbs and index fingers. Then she twisted gently. The sack resisted at first, but finally came free, sliding into Yasmin's palm like an egg yolk. She rushed it to Alex's waiting hands. Even through the thick gloves, he could feel the heat of the dangler, warm with life. He carried it as quickly as he could to the hole in the floor. Just as he was about to open his hands, Alex felt the small shape inside the amber fluid twitch suddenly, as though it had just woken up. He dropped it. The darkness swirled faster for just a moment, as though swallowing, and then the dangler was gone. See, Yasmin said with a crooked smile. Easy. The children shared a look. There was something different between them now, a link that hadn't been there before. For the first time they were acting as a team, and they moved on to the next one. Hours ticked by to the steady rhythm of work. Twist, pull, walk, drop. Twist, pull, walk, drop. The danglers came in all shapes and sizes. Most were insectoid in nature, but Alex occasionally glimpsed fur and teeth through the thin sacks. Every so often a dangler shifted in his hands, usually at the last moment, as if sensing what was coming. After nearly losing his hold on one, Alex began to cup them between his hands like trapping a firefly. He even did this with the danglers that were little more than squishy ooze, though he suspected that these ones hadn't grown correctly and would never wake up at all. Into the void they went. By mid-afternoon, 2/3 of the vines had been cleared. With their goal now in sight, Yasmin even grew more focused. Alex's energy, on the other hand, had begun to flag. His stomach grumbled, and his hands twitched like crazy from the gloves. Nevertheless, he refused to suggest a break. He wanted to prove to Yasmin that she could rely on him. We need to work together, he thought. Share what we know. That's our best chance of getting out of here. As they neared the end of their task, however, he wondered if he was kidding himself. Is helping Yasmin today going to actually change anything? She hasn't said a word to him in hours. What happens if things go back to the way they were after this? What if she refuses to talk to me? He couldn't let that happen. This might be his only chance to convince her that they were on the same side. I should tell her about Unicorn Girl, he thought. I just have to make sure that Lenore doesn't overhear us. If Natasha finds out what I know, she might kick me out of the library, or worse. He glanced over at the cat. For the first hour, she had tracked their every move. When it became clear that nothing interesting was going to happen, however, she placed her head on her paws and closed her eyes. Every so often, she would hiss in her sleep and flicker in and out of visibility. Yasmin, Alex whispered as she walked along the tabletop searching for the next dangler. Can we talk? She gave him an annoyed look, anxious to get the work done. You need a break? She asked. Because Natasha's going to be back soon. We should push on. That's not it, Alex said. Then what? He was just about to tell her when he took another sidelong glance at Lenore. She wasn't there anymore. He heard the tiniest creak of the table to his right, saw a pile of soil flatten as though pressed down by an invisible body. She's listening, Alex thought. She probably wasn't ever asleep at all. That was just a trick. Yasmin lifted her Mets cap and wiped the sweat from her forehead. Have you ever been to City Field? Alex asked awkwardly. He knew he couldn't talk about Unicorn Girl with Lenore around, and baseball had been the first topic that popped into his head. Yasmin gave him a strange look and then turned her attention to the sack dangling before her. Alex figured that it was the end of it, that she would ignore the question just like every other question he had ever asked her about life before the apartment. After a few moments, however, she answered. Maybe she sensed, like Alex, that the silence needed to be filled in order to keep them sharp. Or maybe she's finally starting to trust me. We go on my birthday every year, Yasmin said. Left field bleachers. It's sort of a tradition. Cool, Alex said. We've been too. You're a Mets fan? Yasmin asked with actual glimmer of excitement. Not really. You like the Yankees? She asked. Judging from the look on her face, Yasmin found this prospect even more disgusting than the danglers. Neither one, Alex replied. My brother's the sports fan. He's the big jock. His room, you walk in, and it's nothing but shiny trophies, like a dragon's hoard, an athletic dragon. John's pretty much a slob, except for his trophies. Those he keeps spotless. He has a special cleaning kit my mom got him when his football team won the championship. Yasmin nodded, half listening while she positioned herself to twist off the next dangler. You like any sports at all? She asked. Not really, Alex said. John's always trying to get me to watch more football. He says it's good for me, like a vitamin or something. And then when my attention wanders, because watching people go up and down a field a few feet at a time is really boring, he gets ticked off. What's wrong with you? Why can't you just like sports like a normal kid? Your brother sounds like a jerk, Yasmin said, grimacing. She was growing frustrated with the dangler. It wasn't twisting off as easily as the others. John isn't bad, Alex said, suddenly feeling disloyal to his brother by speaking ill of him. Sometimes he watches old Twilight Zone episodes with me, and one time this kid was being mean to me at school. Alex trailed off, noticing that he had lost Yasmin's attention. How about you? He asked. You have any brothers or sisters? Yasmin opened her mouth about to answer, and then a startled look crossed her face. She glared at Alex with renewed mistrust. My family is none of your business, she snapped. How many times do I have to tell you? We're not friends. Yasmin turned her back towards Alex with a definitive spin of her heel. Apparently their conversation was over. It took a lot to make Alex angry, but he felt it bubbling up inside him now. He was tired and hungry and suddenly feeling foolish for helping this girl in the first place. What's your problem? He asked. Right now, Yasmin replied, tugging cautiously on the vine. This dangler, it's stuck. I mean your problem with me, Yasmin sighed and slowly twisted the dangler in a clockwise motion. I don't have a problem with you, Alex. Yeah, you do, he said. It was nice to let loose, stoke his anger into flames. You have from the start. I don't get it. We're on the same team. This from the boy who hates sports. You know what I mean. We're both prisoners. Prisoners? Yasmin asked with a mocking half smile. Last time I checked, you spend your days in a comfy library making up stories. Poor thing. I'm still trapped here like you. His voice softened, the anger having run its course. You can trust me, Yasmin. I know exactly what you're going through. No, you do not, Yasmin screeched, her eyes suddenly filling with tears. You think just because you've been here a week you have any idea what it's been like for me? You've no clue. It's been all so easy for you. In fact, you're probably having a blast, like you're the star in one of those stories you write. Only you've never seen Natasha truly lose it like I have. You've never seen the horror in your friend's eyes as the magic starts to do its work and... Yasmin talked, her attempt to detach the stubborn sap from the vine grew increasingly violent, until she was twisting it from side to side with reckless abandon. Now it finally came free, and immediately slipped out of her fingers, hitting the table with a solid plop. No! Yasmin exclaimed. 2 red pincers burst through the outer layer of the sack and dug into the wood, gaining purchase and dragging the rest of the body to freedom. Alex watched in disgust and fascination as dozens of bristly legs shook off the rest of the sack like an unwanted sleeping bag. It's a centipede, Alex thought, except it was more than that. Of course centipedes don't have legs that hum and vibrate like the blades of an electric razor, nor did they have periscopic eyes dangling from a stalk in the center of their head. Yasmin brought her foot down, but the creature was too fast. It skittered along the tabletop, squeezing between pots and along leaves, its body undulating like a snake. As it moved, its vibrating legs spit sawdust into the air and left a long, shallow gouge in the tabletop. It passed over a fallen leaf and shredded it to nothing. Shredder, Alex thought, naming the creature in his head. Get it! Yasmin exclaimed. They sprinted towards the back of the nursery, Alex running alongside the table as Yasmin tracked their quarry up top, avoiding the other plants as best she could. When the shredder came close enough to the edge, Alex slammed his gloved fist down. He lifted his hand, hoping to see a bug gut smeared across the table. Nothing. Where'd it go? Yasmin asked. Alex shook his head. He had no idea. They both listened closely for any possible sound. Even Lenore joined them. Ears perked, tiny monkey fingers protruding from her paws. Ready for action, Alex thought, with an unexpected feeling of affection for his foe. Finally he heard a humming sound above them. Alex looked up just as many legs, shadows skittered across the underside of the black lights, dusting the plants below with flecks of glass. There! Alex exclaimed, pointing up. It was too high for the children to reach, even standing on the tabletop. Not too high for Lenore, though. The cat hissed and leaped onto the trellis, clinging to it with her tiny fingers, and climbed upwards. She wasn't an expert climber by any means. Slowly but surely, however, she made her way closer to the light fixture hanging from the ceiling. Not that I'm complaining, Alex said, but why is Lenore helping us? She's not, Yasmin said. She's protecting Natasha's plants. Works for me. They followed the shredder, trying to keep it in sight as it cut a yellow wire with its sharp legs. Electricity sparked in the air. The black lights flickered and then went out altogether. Without them, the plants instantly stopped glowing. The children were plunged into darkness. Alex had never been afraid of the dark, but he had also never been in a magical nursery filled with scary plants and razor-legged centipedes before. That changes things. He ran into the nearest source of light, Yasmin by his side. The shredder followed them, dancing across the suspended metal hoods and finding the next yellow wire in no time at all. It was a quick learner. Another row of black lights went out, birthing a second pocket of darkness. They moved deeper into the nursery away from the exit. We're going the wrong way, Alex said. It's okay, replied Yasmin. We can still fix this. Yasmin, if we don't, Natasha is going to be furious. That might be okay for you, storyteller, but not for me. I'm just the girl who waters the plants. I can be replaced. The suspended black lights creaked in protest as Lenore leaped onto them, landing gracefully on all four paws and immediately vanishing before their eyes. Alex could still track her progress, however. The light streaked beneath her weight as the invisible cat stalked her prey. Lenore moved fast for her size. There was no way the centipede was going to make the next wire before 20 pounds of invisible cat caught her. Get ready, Alex said. If Lenore knocks it down, we can't let it get away this time. They heard a quiet hiss as though Lenore was getting ready to pounce. Before she could, however, the centipede abruptly changed directions and leaped back onto the trellis, landing on the stick vine. What's it doing? Alex wondered, noticing that it was running on the underside of the vine and not along the top. The first dangler fell, cut loose by those tiny vibrating legs. Then the second, the third. It's cutting them all free, Alex realized with horror. Yasmin hopped on the table in one fluid motion, stepping on the first dangler before the sack even opened. By the time she got to the second one, 2 antennae had poked through the skin, their ends like prickly balls. It made a similar end beneath her sneaker. The third one managed to escape its sack entirely. Alice caught a glimpse of far too many eyes before slamming a potted plant on top of it. The shredder had already vanished into the darkness. The vine shook, and Alex heard tiny thumps as dangler after dangler fell onto the table. Listening closely, he heard other sounds as well. Scratching, clicking, slithering. So I want you to stop right there, and I want you to make in your brain an image of what's happening. Maybe make up some creatures that could be magical mixes between insects that you've seen. And maybe this would be a fun thing to try to draw, things that you've created. Lenore, having finished a quick descent down the trellis, approached the sounds. Her back was arched. The black lights augmented her luminous green eyes. Lenore, Alex said, don't! There are too many! You'll get hurt! She looked at him askance, as though concern in his voice had surprised her, and vanished. In the darkness, they heard a loud yowl as Lenore attacked. More sounds. Hissing, a buzzing noise, like a flying insect. A pot shattering. Lenore screeched in pain. Alex knew he shouldn't feel bad. The cat was his enemy, not his friend. But whether it was intentional or not, she was helping them right now. I can't just let her die. He took a step towards the darkness. But Yasmin grabbed his arm and shook her head. We need to help her, Alex said. Lenore can take care of herself, Yasmin said. You were right before. We should get out of here while we still can. The trellis shook as something crashed into it. Lenore hissed, and a chorus of foes replied in challenge. Sharp chirps and angry chitters and high-pitched squeals. So many, Alex thought. Lenore started to hiss a second time, but then there was a snapping sound like a whip smacking concrete, followed by a large thump as something hit the ground. Lenore? Alex asked. He heard a sizzle of electricity followed by a blinding flash. The lights went out. This time, it was all of them. Oh my goodness, what a crazy wild scene. We've got to keep going to see what happens. Chapter 11. The Kind of Shadows with Teeth. Alex was tempted to sprint full speed towards the exit. The trouble with that was that if he tripped or banged into a table, he might lose all sense of direction and start heading the wrong way. Right now, he knew that if he kept walking in a straight line, he would eventually reach the entrance to the apartment. He couldn't risk straying from that. Slow and steady, Yasmin whispered, apparently coming to the same conclusion. Stay together. Her voice was a comfort in the pitch black of the nursery. What wasn't comforting were the other sounds. The crunch of leaves torn between incisors, the grinding of tiny teeth against bark. The creatures were doing what all newborns did, eat. It seemed to be keeping them distracted, for now, which was good, but Alex was afraid that if they heard two juicy children sneaking by, their appetites might take a quick turn towards the non-vegetarian. One step at a time, Alex thought, trying to move as quietly as possible. You'll be there before you... He knocked into Yasmin. Something rattled in the dark, taking notice. Why'd you stop? Alex whispered. I kicked something, she said. I think it's Lenore. Alex bent down, lowering his hands into the darkness. He felt warm, soft fur. She seems to be breathing okay, Alex thought, feeling the rising and falling of her rib cage. But why isn't she moving? He slid his hand over Lenore's stomach and winced. There was something wet and sticky beneath his fingertips. Blood. She's hurt, he said. She'll be fine. We have to help her. We have more important things to worry about than Natasha's little snitch. Alex understood where Yasmin was coming from, but he couldn't just leave Lenore behind. Who knew what the other creatures might do to her? He slipped his hands beneath the cat and cradled her to his chest. I'll carry her, Alex said. Fine, muttered Yasmin. Boy and girl and cat navigated the darkness. Alex's ears grew attuned to the slightest sound, but for the most part the Dangler-born left them alone. There were a few exceptions. The worst of these was when Alex felt something crawling along the nape of his neck, but couldn't do anything about it because he was carrying Lenore. Luckily, Yasmin managed to slap it away just before it scuttled down his back. After a while, the sounds faded to silence. I don't think they're following us anymore, Alex said. They must be all busy eating the plants. Or the other way around, Yasmin said. A lot of these plants are carnivorous. How's the cat? Heavy, but still breathing. I guess it could have been worse, Yasmin said. At least those things are all trapped in the nursery. If they had gotten into Natasha's precious apartment, then we really would have been in trouble. Alex froze in place. Yasmin took a few steps forward and then stopped as well. Alex? She asked. I don't hear your footsteps. About the closet door, he said. I don't think it's going to stop them. Sure it will, Yasmin said. You afraid the insects will crawl right under? Don't worry, it doesn't work that way. When you close the door, it seals magically. Nothing can get through. There was a long silence. You did close the door, right? Yasmin asked. Mostly, Alex said. It's just that it was really dark, so I left the door open the tiniest bit to let in a little light. Yasmin immediately broke into a run. Alex did the same, though he had no chance of keeping up, especially with the giant cat weighing him down. The slap of Yasmin's sneakers grew distant in the dark. A few minutes later, he entered the apartment. It was infested. Alex's first thought was of a city street at rush hour, except instead of commuters and cars, the floor was trafficked by orange roaches and tarantulas and tiny rodents with barbed tails. It's not just the floor either. A gray blur scuttled along an upper bookshelf, knocking magical treasures to the floor. Rubbery strands dangled from the ceiling like jellyfish tentacles. A lizard poked its flat, coin-shaped head out of a torn sofa cushion like a swimmer coming up for air. That's why the nursery got so quiet, Alex thought. They all came here. Glass shattered in the kitchen. This was quickly followed by a thunderous crash from deep inside the apartment. Alex suspected that a dresser in one of the bedrooms had fallen over. They're everywhere, Yasmin exclaimed, swatting at a brown bee that had landed on the brim of her cap. What do we do? Alex felt Lenore move in his arms and placed her gently on the floor. She took in the situation, groggy but aware. Her right side was matted with blood, but that didn't stop her from snatching a green worm between her fingers and pulling it apart. We might be outnumbered, Alex said, but we're a lot bigger than they are. You focus on the floor, Yasmin said. I'll swat. Like one of those city-destroying monsters in old Japanese movies he loved, Alex stomped across the living room floor, trying to crush anything that moved. Meanwhile, Yasmin grabbed a frying pan from the kitchen and used it on the Dangler-born squirming along the walls or scuttling across countertops. For a few minutes, they seemed to be making some headway. Then their prey began to fight back. Alex heard a loud smack as Yasmin swatted a yellow mosquito on her neck. At almost the same moment, he felt a sharp pain in his ankle. He kicked his foot, and a furry lump sailed across the room. Before he could see where it went, something landed on his lower back and immediately began to climb higher, claws tearing through his shirt and into his skin. Get it off of me! He screamed. Turn around, exclaimed Yasmin. Alex spun in place and felt her hand sweep across his back. A black lizard with 8 legs landed on the floor and quickly vanished behind the couch. Thanks, Alex said. While backing warily away from the wall, a swarm of Dangler-born were congregating there, organizing an attack. Let's get to the library. I left the door locked, so there's no way they could have gotten inside. Magical seal, right? That's not going to work, Yasmin said. Look, behind you. Alex turned. Silver webs now covered the 2 archways leading out of the room. He picked up a wand that had been knocked from the bookshelf and poked a single strand. It was as solid as steel wire. No way we're getting past that, Alex thought. We're trapped. The horde of Dangler-born crawled down the wall and crossed the center of the room. Their hisses and rattles took on an almost jubilant tone as they closed in on their prey. Any ideas? Yasmin asked. There are like 100 magical objects in this room, Alex said, raising the wand in his hand. There must be something we can use. I'm not a witch, Yasmin said, and you're not a wizard. Maybe they work for anyone, Alex said, pointing the wand in the direction of the approaching creatures. Kaboom! Flameo! Freeze it! Other than making him feel exceedingly foolish, the wand didn't do anything. The Dangler-born continued their steady approach. Alex pressed his back against the bookshelf. He felt something crawl up his left leg, land on his cheek, in his hair. What's going on here? Natasha stood at the front door, hands on hips, eyes wide with fury. The Dangler-born leaped off Alex's body, searching for safety. My apartment! She screeched, taking in the wreckage around her. What have you done to my beautiful apartment? Natasha flicked her 2 hands outward, and the Dangler-born vanished in tiny puffs of smoke. She crossed the room, ignoring the children for now, and snapped her fingers. The silver webs blocking the archway shriveled into dust. With her path now cleared, Natasha continued into other rooms. Alex heard more puffs as the remaining intruders were exterminated. A few moments later, Natasha returned to the living room and sat in her favorite chair, too livid to speak. Alex thought about trying to explain, but he was afraid that if he broke the silence, it would be the last thing he ever did. Natasha was a coiled snake, looking for a reason to strike. I can explain, Yasmin started. No need, Natasha replied, her eyes like chipped ice. I know what happened. You did something stupid. It brought these vermin into being. They wrecked my apartment. What more do I need to know? Lenore limped over and took a seat by her master's side. There were new wounds all over her body, including a particularly nasty gash just beneath her eye. Natasha wiggled her fingers at Lenore's tail, and Lenore's tail solidified into a long block of stone. How could you let this happen? Natasha snapped. Lenore struggled to flee, her new tail dragging against the floor. You were supposed to be watching them. This is your fault. The witch opened her hand and a tiny fireball shot at Lenore. It seared the back of her fur, leaving a black streak against the orange. Lenore yowled in pain. Stop hurting her, Yasmin exclaimed. She tried to help. Who gave you permission to speak? Natasha asked, nostrils flaring. Sorry. Never had much use for that word, Natasha said. It ain't magic. It don't undo what you've done. It's just a word. She closed her fists and stretched her fingers like a pianist preparing for a performance. It's too bad. You were a good little worker while it lasted. You make some mean mashed potatoes, too. Fluffy, with just a bit of kick to it. I'll miss those potatoes. I really will. She shrugged. Oh well, I'm sure a replacement will come knocking at my door any day now. Someone always does. Natasha raised her hands into the air. When nothing happened, she grimaced and closed her eyes in deep concentration. A bead of sweat ran down her temple. Come on, she muttered like a driver trying to start a car past its prime. Come on. Alex had never seen Natasha struggle to cast a spell before. It must be especially powerful. He turned towards Yasmin. Her eyes were terrified, but she showed no inclination to run. Where could she go? There was no escape from the apartment, no use trying to fight. Alex wished there was something he could do to help, but he knew it was pointless. He would only make things worse on himself. I'm safe, he thought. It's like Yasmin said, for one reason or another. Natasha needs my stories. She won't hurt me. He was ashamed by the relief this thought brought him. Coward, he thought. You're only worried about yourself. He turned away, unable to look at Yasmin any longer. He felt like he had betrayed her. Maybe Natasha won't be able to get the spell to work, Alex thought. But then there was a loud whoosh, like the flames finally coming to life in a stubborn old furnace, and the witch's hands began to glow with an eerie blue light. Finally, Natasha said, smiling with satisfaction. She stretched her hands towards Yasmin. Lightning danced between her fingertips, the magic anxious to be released. Yasmin's eyes widened, and she muttered something that might have been a name. Alex felt her fear as though it were her own. They might not have been friends, but there was still a link between them, a shared experience that no one else could understand. I can't let this happen, he thought. Alex scraped together as much bravery as he could and stepped in front of Yasmin. It wasn't her fault, he said. His voice trembled. It was mine. Move, storyteller, Natasha snarled. I couldn't think of a new idea for a story, Alex said, his mind assembling the details on the fly. And so I begged Yasmin to take me down into the nursery. I thought, creepy plants, maybe I can think of something cool. She made me promise not to touch anything. Only when she wasn't looking I got curious and fed one of the vines. I guess I fed it the wrong thing because the next thing I know, it had all these sacks hanging from it. Alex caught a glimpse of Yasmin's flabbergasted expression. She couldn't believe that he was taking the blame for her. You did this? Natasha asked, wincing as a fresh volley of lightning snapped between her fingers. Her hands had begun to shake violently. She balled them into fists, trying to keep the magic in check. You're more trouble than you're worth, storyteller. Alex realized that he had made a horrible mistake. The fact that he wrote scary stories might have helped him if Natasha was thinking logically, but now she was barely thinking at all. She just wanted to punish someone. The witch stretched her hands towards him. He closed his eyes. No, 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 she commanded. You have to open your eyes or you'll ruin the final... The apartment began to quake. No, Natasha exclaimed, not now. The distraction caused the witch to lose her hold on the spell. Blue fire shot from her hands and struck the wall with an anticlimactic puff of smoke. The spell only works on people, Alex thought, wondering what it would have done to him. Story, Natasha exclaimed, grasping him by the shirt and drawing him close. Now. Alex did as he was told without hesitation. He had tested his luck enough for the day. As the apartment continued to rumble, he ran to the library, snagged one of the Nightbooks on the desk, and hustled back. In his absence, a large crack had appeared on the living room wall. A sickly sweet smell like cotton candy left in the car on a hot summer's day filled the room. What is that? Alex asked, holding his nose. It doesn't matter, Natasha said. Just read your story, and for your sake, it better be a good one. All right, so we're going to read one of his stories, and it's titled The Playground. Foster Playground was where all the dead kids played. You could hear them at night, giggling and whispering, even when there was no wind. Swings arced high into the sky, and the seesaw squeaked up and down. Todd knew to stay away. He had heard stories about the bad things that happened there, but when his best friend Jenny died, his heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, and all he could think about was how badly he wanted to see her again. The night after her funeral, he snuck out of his house and went to the playground. It was a warm summer evening, but as soon as Todd stepped onto the wood chips, he began to shiver. The air was different here, not just colder, but with a metallic taste, like biting down on an old coin. It wasn't air meant for the living people. I don't belong here, Todd thought. He almost left, but then he remembered Jenny and how lonely she must feel, and willed his feet across the wood chips. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Soon Todd stood before the tall wooden tower at the center of the playground. Two enclosed sides quailed from its top. One was red and one was green, but they both looked the same in the dark. Suddenly, there was a loud thump at the top of the tower, and the slide rattled and shook beneath the weight of a passenger. Seconds later, a boy about Todd's age shot out of the hole in the bottom. His skin was pale, and he wore clothes that Todd had seen only in black and white movies. The pale boy examined Todd from head to toe. When he seemed satisfied, he placed 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled loudly. New faces peeked down at them from the top of the tower. Soon children were pouring from the slides. Girls and boys, toddlers and teenagers. Some wore old clothes, though none as old as the pale boys. Others wore clothes like Todd's. Everyone seemed happy to see him. They jostled for position, trying to get as close to Todd as possible, as though he were a fire by which they could all warm their hands. No one spoke. Their smiles were bright and wide. Todd asked if Jenny was there, but the children just laughed and ushered him from one piece of playground equipment to the next. They gave him no time to think. Giggles chased him to the top of the rock wall. Cold hands pushed him on the swings. They played for hours. From the top of the tower, the pale boy watched it all. At one point, Todd thought he saw a second figure up there as well, a girl. She kept trying to reach the slides, but the pale boy blocked her path. In time, Todd found himself laughing along with the other children. It was hard to remember why he had been so scared to come here. The playground was a nice place. It was where he belonged. He only wished he were warmer. His body felt encased in ice, and it was becoming harder and harder to breathe. He looked up at the pale boy, wondering if he knew what was going on, but the boy wasn't looking in his direction anymore. He was looking at the sky, where threads of morning sunlight were just beginning to appear. The boy's face curled into a wicked smile. In a flash, Todd remembered the stories he had heard about this place, and finally, he understood. If I'm still here in the morning, I'll be here forever. He spun around trying to escape, but the children grabbed him and pulled him back. They were no longer smiling. Todd tried to shout for help, but all that came out were plumes of cold air. The children dragged him backwards, giggling, making a game of it now. Todd's feet left shallow trails on the wood chips. Above him, he could see the sun starting to rise. Morning was just a few minutes away. He heard the sound of someone coming down the slide and watched the opening, expecting to see the pale boy, his mocking grin, except it wasn't the pale boy. It was Jenny. She shoved the children away and helped Todd to his feet. She mouthed, "Go! Go!" Todd ran as fast as he could, racing the children to the edge of the playground. He felt tiny hands claw at the back of his shirt, and then he leaped onto the safety of the grass. When he turned around, the children were already walking with slumped shoulders back towards the wooden tower. Only Jenny remained, looking in his direction. "Thank you," Todd said, tears filling his eyes, "and goodbye." She smiled sadly and vanished in the morning light. As Alex reached the end of the story, the apartment gave one final shudder, knocking a jade talisman off its pedestal, and stopped rumbling completely. Yasmin sighed with relief. Alex's feelings were more complicated. He was glad that the apartment hadn't crumbled into dust, but unnerved by the power his stories held over such an evil place. Does that prove that there's something wrong with me? He wondered. Alex's thoughts drifted into the story he refused to tell Natasha, the real reason he had decided to toss his Nightbooks into the furnace. He had been in math when the phone rang. Natasha grabbed his arm, breaking his train of thought. "Seriously?" she asked. "That's the end of the story?" The murderous fury had left her eyes, but she didn't exactly look happy either. "Was it bad?" Alex asked, warmth spreading all over his face. "No," Natasha said. "That's the point. It's not bad at all. The boy gets away, safe and sound." "Sometimes that happens." "Not in my experience." The story wasn't dark enough for her, Alex thought. There were creepy dead kids, which was always good. But at its heart, the playground was more about friendship than ghosts. Alex had written it after his best friend moved to New Jersey. "How about this instead?" Natasha suggested. "The ghosts follow the boy home and kill him in his sleep. Much better. The ghost can't leave the playground." "That isn't even a thing," the witch insisted. "Ghosts haunt houses and castles and hotels. Maybe the occasional school. I've never heard of a ghost haunting a playground. And I'm a witch, which makes me an—" "Jenny helps Todd escape," Alex said. His cheeks were still red, but now it was from stubbornness, not embarrassment. "That's what happens. She's a true friend even after her death." "You mean it's a happy ending?" Natasha asked, mortified. Alex shrugged his shoulders. "It's not exactly happy," he said. "Jenny is still dead, and she's going to be trapped in that playground for eternity. Does that make you feel better?" "A little," Natasha admitted. "But what I think isn't important. Happy endings can be dangerous things. You soothed the apartment this time, but your story just as easily could have—" "I liked it," Yasmin said. Natasha and Alex turned in surprise. It was the first time Yasmin had spoken during their story sessions. "No one asked you," snarled Natasha. She shook her head, and the debris covering the living room floor. "Clean this place up, storyteller. Girl, attend to the nursery. Make sure you repot any plants that can be saved. I have some new orders coming in, and I don't want to be short on ingredients. When I wake up tomorrow, I expect this place to be spotless." Alex and Yasmin exchanged a look of relief. Considering the alternative, staying up all night cleaning seemed like a small punishment indeed. They immediately set to work on their assigned tasks. Yasmin smiled at Alex and waved goodbye before entering the nursery. He waved back. Meanwhile, Natasha shuffled across the floor, her gait like that of an old woman, and paused before the wall with a big crack. She raised a hand as though to cast some sort of spell, and then thought better of it, and continued towards the bedroom at the end of the hall. Natasha's body blocked his view of the keyhole, but the telltale scratching of a bone key left little doubt that she was going into her secret room. Whenever Natasha had done this in the past, she always glanced over her shoulder, first to make sure no one was watching. If Yasmin or Alex happened to be in the nearby vicinity, she would send them away before opening the door. Tonight, however, Natasha's exhaustion had gotten the better of her. Without so much as a glance over her shoulder, she carelessly opened the door wide and stepped across the threshold. For just a moment, Alex was able to see past her. Night, sky, pine trees, forest floor. Natasha closed the door. It's not a room, Alex thought, his heart fluttering with excitement. It's an exit. We can use it to escape. All they needed was the witch's key. By the time Alex finally crawled beneath the blankets, his entire body ached. Still, he was in a good mood. There were some stains that would require a second scrubbing in the morning, but other than that, the apartment had been restored to its pre-Dangler state. He closed his eyes and thought about Natasha's keys. She never puts them down, ever. So how do I get a hold of them? His mind cycled through possible ideas, looking for one that fit. It was like trying to figure out what should happen next when he was writing a story. Could I pickpocket her? Not without getting caught. What about when she sleeps? Natasha locked her bedroom door at night, so that wouldn't work. I need a key to steal the key. Can I use any of the magical artifacts on the shelves? Alex didn't think so. He had handled many of them while cleaning and felt nothing magical at all. If he were a warlock, then maybe. Why are you thinking so hard? He heard his older brother interject. Just hit her over the head with a frying pan and be done with it. Alex could see all sorts of problems with that plan, too. What if he missed? What if she didn't lose consciousness? What if Lenore stopped him? It was too big a risk. He wished he could brainstorm ideas with Yasmin. She understood Natasha and the apartment a lot better than him. But can I trust her? He didn't know. It was clear that Yasmin had experienced some horrible things. He remembered what she'd said about seeing the horror in her friend's eyes. There must have been other prisoners before me, Alex thought. That's why she's scared of acting out against Natasha. She's seen firsthand what happens when you don't behave. If he told her what he was planning, Yasmin might immediately spill the beans rather than risk getting in trouble. Then again, he thought, I'm not sure I have a choice. I can't do this on my own. He turned on his side, too tired to think about it any longer. Despite his exhaustion, sleep refused to come. He shivered in fear, wondering if Yasmin's friend had once slept in the same bed as him, if not the bottom bunk. Then maybe on the top one. What about the mystery girl who wrote in the storybooks? Did she sleep here too? What if she didn't escape? What if this one night, asleep in this very bed, Natasha crept into this room and dragged her out? He heard a rustling sound. Alex sat up in bed, instantly awake. Who's there? He asked. The noise continued. He crept out of bed, his bare feet icy cold on the wooden floor, and carefully scanned the room. The rustling was coming from the closet. Natasha must have missed one of the Dangler-born, he thought. Seeing no better weapon available, he picked up one of the sneakers, still sticky with bug guts. He pattered across the floor. Alex gathered his courage, then opened the door quickly, intending to take the visitor by surprise. The sound stopped. The closet looked no different than usual. His backpack was tucked in one corner. Above it, clothes and empty hangers hung from a wooden rod. What the heck? Alex asked, mystified. He lifted his bag, wondering if something might be hiding behind it, and a dark shape scuttled out of a hole, torn in the side. With a shriek of surprise, Alex dropped the backpack and kicked the closet door shut, catching the insect just as it was crossing the threshold. There was a crunching noise, like someone squeezing a fistful of potato chips, and the insect stopped moving. The shredder, Alex thought, recognizing the dozens of sharp, bristly legs. Must have been hiding in my backpack when Natasha cleaned out the apartment. He glanced at the bag, wondering what the shredder had been up to the entire time. And his heart froze. A trail of torn paper spilled from the hole. With trembling hands, Alex knelt down and unzipped the backpack. No! He exclaimed. He turned the entire bag over, hoping that there was some kind of mistake, and that his 2 nightbooks would fall to the floor, and all would be well. They didn't. Instead, shredded paper rained down, collecting in a pile in front of him. He could make out the occasional word, phantom, bird, coffin, but mostly it was just incoherent letters. His stories had been destroyed. Oh my gosh. So, all of his nightbooks that he's been counting on are just gone, shredded. What do you think he's going to do? That must be so frustrating. Oh my goodness. So, I think I'm going to stop here. My voice is getting a little sore. But I hope you're enjoying this book so far. I just love the idea of being able to picture all these different creatures and all these different plants. So I think I might work on some art a little bit this evening. And I'll share with you if I create something. But I hope you guys are well and enjoyed the story. I'll see you guys later. Bye.